lunatics, long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government.
Welcome to the Politics Guys. I'm Trey Orndorff, a political scientist at Oklahoma Christian University, and I'm joined by Ken, a professor of law at Chase Law School, for our supporters exclusive Federalist Papers show. Ken, welcome.
It's great to be back, Trey.
This has been a lot of fun. You know, we started a long time ago. We did the Constitution show, which has now become freely available for supporters 1 week at a time on Wednesdays, which is really cool. And then right now what we're doing is we've been going through the Federalist Papers, and we've gotten a ton of really positive feedback about this because as I really looked at it, there's not a lot of actually more publicly available or kind of that level of understanding for the Federalist Papers. There's not a great book on that front. And so not only have we been doing this, Ken, but we're doing it on the Substack as well. And I've got that there. So take a look in the show notes. You can follow even more deeply along with the things that we're going to be talking about in our Substack. So we did an overview, Ken. Then we took a look at the bulk of the writings of John Jay after getting started. And now we're going to come back and we're going to be with Hamilton for 6, 7, and 8. And it's going to be a tonal shift. If you're reading along, you're going to have a tonal shift because, well, Hamilton has a lot more negative view of human nature than Jay did, right? And it comes across the page clearly. And if you look at their writings, it comes across the page clearly. And I'll be honest, for listeners, thinking about human nature is really going to be key to understanding the writers of this. As Kyle Scott points out in his really excellent work on the Federalist Papers, he says, if a reader can develop a sound understanding of Publius's view of human nature, the reader is on their way to developing a strong understanding of what those writers believed was essential for effective government and why. And again, Hamilton has this really deeply negative view. He puts it this way in number 6, because we're going to be taking a look at 6, 7, and 8 today. He says that, quote, men are ambitious, vindictive, that momentary passions and immediate interest have a more active control over human conduct than general or more remote considerations of things like policy, utility, or justice, end quote. Later, in a later paper, Hamilton's going to say, quote, what is government itself but the greatest of all reflections on human nature? If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. And so the problem here is that people are terrible, and therefore we're going to need a constitution. And so that's what we're going to kind of get into. And so, Ken, I don't know about for you, but I always try to set this up in contrast because Hamilton kind of stands on one side. And although he's not an author or a participant in the debates over the Constitution, on the other side, you kind of have Thomas Jefferson presenting the other view. And if you go back in history, really, you got Hamilton on one side. He's the Hobbesian, going, it's all going to go to hell in a handbasket before you know it. And on the other side, you got Jefferson kind of maybe even waltzing through the roses a little more than a Locke, saying, listen, it's all going to be fine. Just let liberty happen. A revolution every now and then, not a big deal, you know? And so it's kind of hard to not read Hamilton here without recognizing he's kind of responding to that view.
Yeah, and to the anti-federalists generally, which I don't know that Jefferson was explicitly an anti-federalist.
No, because he's kind of out of the game right then.
Yeah, but I think that in the way that you're describing him, those views were more aligned with the anti-federalists than with the federalists. And you had already used the word Hobbesian in the last episode when we talked about John Jay's papers, and so I think in that sense, the views that you're ascribing to Hamilton would, I think, also be fairly called Hobbesian. So these are maybe similar to what we've already been hearing from Jay. And I think the reasons, for the Hobbesianism or for the negative view of human nature here is that, largely these are responses to anti-federalist arguments that, the anti-federalists are saying we don't really need a strong central government. In fact, a strong central government is going to be more of a threat to liberty than if we just have weak government, which can't threaten liberty. And so it really, I think what Jay and now even more strongly Hamilton are trying to set up in response to that argument is, but if you don't have a strong government, then you're going to face threats, from other people that you're going to wish that the government could protect you against. And so that's actually at least as much of a threat as you would face from a government. And so that's I think that's the sort of the use of the Hobbesianism is to argue that it justifies strengthening the government compared to what we had before.
Well, and so much so that Hamilton it makes not as much here, but he makes suggestions at the Constitutional Convention, for example, that the states can't provide that role, right? As he famously and forcefully argues at the Constitutional Convention, he says, "quote One great error is that we suppose mankind more honest than they are," end quote. And as a matter of fact, he would even introduce a plan that would vest full sovereignty in national government and kind of phase out states. Now, there's a whole lot of historical argument about would he do that because that's what he believed, or was he trying to make a very audacious position so that they could come back and still get what he thought was the best thing. But either way, like you're saying, he's kind of taking that J view another step forward. He's even more pessimistic than Jay.
Yeah. I mean, Jay had mostly addressed himself to, external threats. And, Jay had kind of said, if the states are each left to their own devices, they're not going to adequately be able to protect against a British reinvasion, a Spanish invasion, an invasion by Native American Indians, and so Jay had mostly focused on those kind of threats, and then Hamilton, wants to say, and not only that, but basically we would be in nonstop civil war if we only had a weak kind of confederacy and didn't have a strong national government that could keep a lid on that. So he gives a lot of reasons in Federalist number 6 for his prediction that if we don't strengthen the government, we will have a lot of civil war. And he uses, as you pointed out, the we shouldn't forget that men are ambitious, vindictive, and rapacious. He argues that the governments act out of the love of power, the desire for preeminence and dominion, and things like that. So he says that there's a lot of people who would be running these state governments are going to have reasons to make trouble for each other. And then he goes on both to catalog some examples from history and some then contemporary problems where he thinks that these hostilities would emerge. So I guess we can go through some of those.
And I think for people who first kind of hear and they're encountering the Federalist Papers, or really early, there's a real big misconception over what these individuals thought. There's kind of the mythical version of it, and then actually what happened. And so, for example, I think for contemporary readers to think that there were any framers who thought that they would do away with states, it almost kind of strikes you as strange. But keep in mind, there was a whole cadre of individuals at this point, contemporaneous to the Federalist Papers, who thought the states were terrible. There's this really famous quote from a lawyer who called Massachusetts, all of its laws, the vilest collection of trash that mankind has ever collected. I mean, I don't think that would go over today. Can you imagine? You can imagine me going, well, I don't know, Oklahoma's laws are the vilest collection of trash that anybody. I could just see the opportunity to move forward going down. Unfortunately, I have to end myself and Ken there as part of our ad-supported preview. If you want to get more of this episode and others like it, you've got to become a supporter of the Politics Guys. It's really easy to do. It just takes a couple of minutes. All I need you to do is to head down to the show notes and click on the support link that's located there. And you can get access to not just this episode, but other episodes just like it. You can get all going back to the beginning of the Federalist Papers. You can get access to Mike and Michael's ongoing series. There's just so much content available. You also get access to our Discord group and so much more. So again, head down to the show notes and click on the support link, or head to politicsguys.com/support or patreon.com/Politics Guys. Become a supporter of the show and unlock even more than just these episodes. Unlock the Discord group and unlock my favorite feature, not having any ads on this or any of our episodes, including our weekend episodes. If you would take a moment to like, share, and subscribe this episode and become a supporter now so that you can get all of that and more. A giant shout out to the executive producers of the Politics Guys, who are Wilmer Moreno, Daniel Toe, Ryan Beasley, Don Oglesby, Derek Schmidt, Dakota Heath, Jason Chrysler, Dave Dean, Jeremy Larson, Brian Matza, Jody Marie Miller, and Sean Fugit. We'll be back with a full episode this weekend. I hope you'll join us then.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.